Today we're going to be talking about fire-related water damage and how we can address that water damage due to fire suppression activities or an accidental discharge of a sprinkler system. So I thank everybody for their time today, and hopefully we'll be able to provide some valuable information to all of you. Before we get started, I want to take a second to introduce myself. My name is Nick Mayo, and I'm a Senior Risk Control Consultant for HAI Group. After the training session today, we will be sending a follow-up email with my contact information, along with a copy of this recording, the PowerPoint itself, and any relevant materials in relation to this training session. With that will also be a link for a survey to get your feedback in regards to the material that we present. So we definitely value your feedback. Any information that you may be able to give back to us with positive or even comments that we can improve this training session, please do provide that feedback within that survey. So to get started, what we're going to learn today and what we're going to talk about, it talks about the importance of pre-fire planning for all of your buildings. So that's pre-planning your buildings to know what would happen in case of a fire or discharge of a sprinkler system and where water is going to go. We also are going to discuss the importance of having a proactive relationship and friendship with your local authority having jurisdiction, how to deal with fire-related water damage. So in tandem with that, we're talking about the potential damage from fire hoses or sprinkler heads, the options for stopping water flow from a sprinkler head that you may have, and also the options for diverting water from an activated head within your building. To round it all out, how to follow up with your authority having jurisdiction for further recommendations and information. We will touch on that as well. So what's at stake? How did this training come to fruition? For our experience as an insurance company, since 2016, housing organizations have filed dozens of property damage claims due to water issues from fire suppression sprinklers, with an approximate total losses of over $12 million for our experience. Damages for us on average are just over $150,000 per claim, highlighting why it's so important to plan for fire-related water issues. To give you even a little more information for our experience as HAI Group, in the last 5 years, we've had $51 million in losses related to water damage. Only fires as a category has been more costly for our experience. As we talked about in the beginning of this slide, $12 million of that 50 are due to sprinkler systems. So that can be a sprinkler system from an activated head or a frozen pipe, or even an accidental discharge due to a broken sprinkler head. Individual claims range from small claims, maybe from hanging something on a sprinkler head, resulting in $7,000 to $10,000 worth of damage. Intentionally breaking sprinkler heads, which has been claims of $20,000 or more. And again, when it runs into the instances of an activated head due to an unattended cooking fire, that's how we get into this category of water damage claims. So if you've ever witnessed a structure fire, you know that firefighters often break windows, open walls, cut holes in the affected building's roof to extinguish the fire. Firefighters always will apply water to the building and surrounding areas, which we call exposures. On average, a fire in a residential structure requires 2 or more hose lines coming off a fire engine pumper. While fighting fire with 2 hose lines for just 5 minutes, firefighters can spray more than 1,000 gallons of water. A single hose line can pump out 80 to 125 gallons of water per minute. That will determine on the rated capacity of the pump, along with the inside diameter of the hose line, along with the nozzle combination. But if we're talking about 80 to 125 gallons of water per minute, depending on what's burning, how long it's been burning, and how much fire they need to put out, that's a lot of water that's going to get put in a building to extinguish that fire. So how is water applied to the structure? As I said in the previous slide, how it's applied and for how long depends on the building construction, the property's layout, the burning material, and how long it's been burning. Whatever the process, the water volume will be significant. Good news, and again, while we're here today, is to collect information on how we can mitigate the resulting damage from a fire or from a discharge of a sprinkler system with proper planning. So hopefully today, this conversation in this training webinar helps facilitate the proper planning that you can do as property owners within your organizations. So pre-fire planning, risks are easier to manage if you have a plan in place before a disaster strikes. That's why we have emergency operations plans, incident action plans, business continuity plans. So if we can have a plan beforehand, typically if we have some type of checklist that we can go down post-incident, then we can manage those risks a little easier. Firefighters can save more lives than property if they know the property's layout, construction type, occupancy, and other important building features. So along with your staff knowing the layout of the building and important building features, if you invite the fire department in to maybe do a walkthrough of your building, then they'll be able to quicker and more efficiently attack that fire because they'll know where to go within that building to put that fire out. A better plan can also potentially lead to less damage because throughout the planning process, you can identify risks that maybe you didn't know about and be proactive rather than reactive in remediating those risks. So when developing any type of plan for your building, as I said before, you can enlist the help from your local fire department to develop an emergency response plan. Reaching out and scheduling a walkthrough of your property. If I'm the fire department representative coming in to your property, we're going to identify construction characteristics, the location of the nearest fire hydrant and additional water sources or fire department connections on the exterior of the building. Locating the building's fire protection equipment room is important because especially in the fire service, firefighters want to know where that fire protection equipment room is so they can know where the main water shutoffs for the building are, if they need to isolate a valve, or they know, especially on the outside of that building, that's where the fire department connection will be. So that's where they'll connect their hose on the exterior of the building to feed either the sprinkler system, standpipe system, and along with that, the building's fire pump. Within that walkthrough, the fire department can identify your fire protection system's isolation valves and shutoffs. So along with your main control valves that come off, that first branch of your sprinkler system, as we go from floor to floor within that building, identifying isolation valves and marking them with a placard is a good thing to have, because if it's a fire, let's say on the fourth floor of a building, and you have an activated sprinkler head, we can shut down that fourth floor valve and still keep the rest of the building in service. If we close the main valve for the whole system, then the entire system could be out of service. So during that pre-fire planning process, that walkthrough, not only as a housing organization, you can walk through your property and see how a fire department will respond. The fire department can start planning the way that they're going to respond to that particular building, because depending on the construction, they might want to set up trucks and position apparatus a certain way and find the best way and easiest way to get inside that building to put out that fire. So in that pre-planning, when we start considering water damage, so that's one of the major reasons why we're having this discussion today, due to the millions of dollars that we've spent as an insurance company in mitigating water damage claims. So are there any mechanical systems in the building that could be affected by a large volume of water? So that being said, in a high-rise building, your elevator, mechanical equipment, electrical systems, boilers, furnaces, major mechanical systems within the building. If a large volume of water was to enter the space that they're housed in, what protection systems are in place? Are there drains in place? Can those building systems be protected by a large volume of water? Within the building, can you use plumbing features to remove excess water? So if there is an area in the building where there are floor drains, or even using shower drains or plumbing stacks to remove water from an individual floor or multiple floors, identifying plumbing features is a great way to get water out of your building if you have no other ways to do it. Within your pre-planning, you can identify if you have a large supply of equipment on hand for water cleanup. So especially in a high-rise location, do you have an adequate number of mops and cleaning buckets, along with that salvage tarps and covers, so that way things aren't going to get damaged. So within that planning, you're looking at the layout of your building, particular construction features, mechanical systems within the building that can be affected if there was a large volume of water, and then also how you can use plumbing features in your building to get that excess water out of the building. So what can you do during that pre-planning process? Use bold signage throughout your building. So if it's an important mechanical room, having bold signage on the outside of the door, it's a great way to let emergency personnel know, through this door is the fire protection equipment room, or a major electrical panel, or this is the boiler room and the furnace room, and things like that. If your building does have a key vault system on the exterior of the building, making sure that the keys within that key vault are up to date and actually are active keys for that building, because then if the fire department has keys to get in, then they wouldn't have to use forcible entry methods to get in your building and unfortunately have to break a door or pick a lock and things of that nature. During your planning, you're also going to inspect your fire protection equipment. We know as property owners, any type of fire protection equipment that we have within our building, we need to have it inspected on a regular schedule per NFPA code. So in that pre-plan, it helps to identify we have a standpipe system, and this is the inspection schedule for it versus a sprinkler system, fire pump, and so on and so forth. Having information on hand with a local disaster mitigation company. Again, if you have a large volume of water that you need to clean up and remediate, if you have a direct number on call, so that way once the fire department along with the local building and health department give you the okay to re-enter a building, after an incident, if you have a disaster mitigation company on call, then you can start to get them rolling so they can get in and start mitigating that water. We're going to talk about some mold and moisture issues towards the end of this training, but that's, having them on call is definitely going to be a good thing to have in your back pocket to help mitigating that, incident or accident. Ensuring your organization's management and staff are familiar with your building's layout and emergency plan. I can truly say this, that emergency planning is great. Having different annexes that will tell you, this is what to do in case of a fire, or in case of a hurricane or a tornado, or what to do in case of an accidental discharge of a sprinkler system. Having a plan is the first step, but then communicating that plan to management and staff and making sure everybody is trained, that is an integral part of emergency planning. So if we do have plans, make sure everybody knows and is aware of what to do. If you need help in developing plans through your local authority having jurisdiction, you can get recommendations from them. And then along with us at HAI and our risk management department, we have sample plans pretty much that we've distributed to a vast majority of housing authorities across the country. So if you do need some sample language, or if you need an online tool to help develop a business continuity plan, we do have that available. So please reach out and we'll get that information in your hands so you can start that emergency planning process. So now we're going to talk a little bit about sprinkler systems. As we know, NFPA 13 is the standard for the install of sprinkler systems. The purpose of NFPA 13 is to provide a reasonable degree of protection for life and property from fire through the standardization of design, installation, and testing requirements for sprinkler systems based on sound engineering principles, test data, and field experience. So when we talk about sprinkler systems, any information that we want to get our local authority having jurisdiction, be it a fire marshal's office or fire prevention division, is going to reference NFPA 13. We just want to make sure that when we communicate with the AHJ, what version of the code are they currently working off of. So if they're working off of, a set of codes from 2020 and they're not on the latest revision, that's their call. They determine what set of codes they go by along with the version. So if we need to reference any material on sprinkler systems, NFPA 13 is going to be your foundation to be able to do that. So in talking about mitigating damage and the potential for sprinkler system discharge, some things that we can do for the actual sprinkler system itself. Sprinkler protection guards protect sprinkler heads from damage. They do exist. They are a great tool. It almost looks like a small little metal bird cage that can go around a sprinkler head. But in saying that, when it comes to installing those sprinkler protection guards, we want to make sure we follow any applicable NFPA and local standards. We want to make sure that that sprinkler protection guard does not inhibit that sprinkler from working and activating in the way that it was designed. So we need to follow manufacturer's recommendations when it comes to installing the actual sprinkler protection guard. We want to verify whether our sprinkler system is supervised or has flow monitors. So the majority of sprinkler systems within buildings are going to be supervised. And what supervised means is there will be a flow switch within that sprinkler system that when activated, that switch will communicate with the fire alarm system. The fire alarm system will give an alert to a central station dispatch or your fire department dispatch. So if your sprinkler system is what we call supervised, we want to make sure that someone is getting that flow monitor indicator, so that way a fire department can be dispatched. So even when there's a small bump in pressure in the system or a discharge of a sprinkler system and that flow monitor activates, that's what would activate the fire alarm system in the building, and either, depending on the recommendations that you have as a housing authority, people will shelter in place or evacuate the building, along with the fire department will start rolling to the scene to kind of figure out what's going on. Having a plan for the accidental discharge of water. So discussing with staff how to handle an incident, especially with those involved in property maintenance and contracted services. That's the first step in this. And we're going to talk about a little more in the following slides, but having a plan for the accidental discharge. So we're talking about, let's say someone is moving into a unit and accidentally hits a sprinkler head, or someone's doing maintenance on a unit and accidentally hits a sprinkler head. So therefore, it's a situation where we know with 100% certainty that the sprinkler activation is not due to a fire. Having a plan on what to do is definitely a good step in your emergency planning. So to start doing that, we need to determine if any on-site staff have experience or training to deal with a fire sprinkler discharge. Your authority having jurisdiction, you can consult with them in regards to our procedure for either closing water supply valves or chocking sprinkler heads before touching any part of the system. Always, please keep in mind, when in doubt, ask your fire department for recommendations on dealing with an activated sprinkler head. A fire department jurisdiction varies from state to state and county to county. So what works for one housing authority or one organization may not work for another, depending on the fire department and that authority having jurisdiction. So if you went to them and you asked them, what is the best procedure and what are your recommendations? One representative, may say that they're okay with closing an isolation valve for just a particular floor if a person is adequately trained. Other fire departments may say we only want, like sprinkler stops or chalks to be put in that independent sprinkler head to stop that flow. Other fire departments or authority having jurisdictions may say do nothing, get out of the building, let the fire department do their job. But at least you had that communication with them and you created a plan. So I think the most important part of this slide is, when in doubt and when you're starting your process, please ask the fire department for recommendations on what to do with an activated sprinkler head. If it's an activated head, do it to a fire, get out of the building, call 911 and start your accountability process. But if like I said, if it's a 100% known accidental discharge, they might be able to give some feedback on what they would like you to do. So if you're allowed and you're certain that the discharge was accidental, you can control the flow of water from your sprinkler head per your operating procedures. Or on the flip side, you can meet the fire department at the building's front entrance to discuss what happened. So if someone was meeting the fire department at the front door and you can let them know the floor number, the unit number, or where the exact location for the discharge is, then they'll be able to get up there quicker because they won't have to go to the fire panel to see that's on the 4th floor, so on and so forth. Again, and if you can provide the fire department information on the location of the fire protection equipment room, isolation valves, and fire alarm panel, it's just going to make their process a little simpler when they're on scene. So time is of the essence to avoid water damage, especially with a sprinkler head. We have tens of gallons flowing from that sprinkler head per minute. So the quicker the fire department can shut down that water supply to that sprinkler system, then obviously we can start controlling where the water is going and where it's going to end up in the actual building itself. So in talking about sprinkler systems, and I've already touched on this in the earlier parts of the presentation, sprinkler systems will have isolation valves. They're primarily used to control or isolate portions of a building sprinkler system. So valves, if they are there, they need to be labeled and identified. As I said before, we need to be aware because upon closing an isolation valve, a portion, which is a particular zone of that sprinkler system, will be inoperable. So if we are able to locate and use and isolate a portion of that sprinkler system due to an accidental discharge, then we can shut down that particular zone and the rest of the sprinkler system stays in service. Usually on a sprinkler system, the main control valve on that sprinkler system will be chained and locked in the open position, and the only person that can either open that lock or shut that sprinkler system down from the main control valve is going to be a fire department rep or a third-party contractor working on the system. But the small little isolation valves within the branches of the system, those are just the branches that they would close if they have to replace a sprinkler head if one was broken or activated. Sprinkler head stop. So in the photo here, you can see a yellow mechanical device. It's a cam style device that when inserted in a sprinkler head, it can quickly stop the flow of water from that individual sprinkler head. So sprinkler stops may not work with all type of sprinkler heads, but an important note here is going to be that any type of stop that you would put in a sprinkler head is going to require some type of training and personal protective equipment. So if we do have the knowledge and training and our staff is ready and available and also able to install a type of sprinkler head stop, then we want to make sure that they're trained to do so. The water coming out of that sprinkler head is going to feel like you're standing beneath a waterfall, so you are going to get very wet. So if an employee has to get up on a ladder to reach that sprinkler head, we know that brings in another hazard. So if we do go down the road where your authority having jurisdiction allows you to place in a device like this as a pair of wedges or a sprinkler head stop. We want to make sure that our employees are adequately trained, have information, and can do it in a safe and effective manner. So another way we can mitigate damage, and what we're going to talk about on this slide, is going to be elevator threshold drains. So these drains, which is in the bottom portion of the slide, it's designed to fit in front of the elevator door or in front of an elevator bank to limit water flow into the elevator shaft. This is going to protect mechanical parts of the elevator shafts from filling up with water, and personnel from the effects of cascading water when staging and performing emergency egress. So when it comes to mitigating damage of water flow from a sprinkler head, usually where does water go? It's going to be the path of least resistance, and then it's going to find an opening. What we see in the insurance world is water 9 times out of 10, especially in a high-rise structure, is going to end up in the elevator shaft. So within that elevator shaft, we have, the mechanical parts of the elevator, electrical components of the elevator. So it's a very costly event if that elevator is to go down from an insurance perspective, but also from a housing perspective. When you lose your elevators in a building that might have, elderly or disabled residents, that's going to be a big problem. So there are companies that make these threshold drains. Now, the process to install that drain is going to have to be looked at and spec'd out by an engineer, because what they're going to have to do is cut into the slab in front of that elevator bank, and then what they do is trench that particular portion of the flooring, install that drain, and then route that piping into the elevator shaft and out of the building. So depending on the construction features of your building, the type of slab that floor is made up and constructed of, along with different engineering designs of your actual elevator mechanicals, these threshold drains can be installed. And what that's going to do is water's not going to get in the actual elevator shaft. It's going to go in that drain, out the piping, and exit the building. So it's something that we've seen some organizations install. If you're building a new building, some code in certain jurisdictions require drains like this to be installed in front of your elevators. So, the process to retrofit an old building versus the process to install on a new building are going to be two different things. But having the information, we can definitely direct you to representatives who manufacture drains like this, and we can look into that as a project to, enhance that risk management portfolio for your building. So again, when we're mitigating damage, we're talking about cooking fires. I'm sure the majority of you on the call or that are going to view this presentation know about auto outs or some type of suppression device to be above your stove. So cooking fires and unattended cooking fires is one of our most frequent types of fire claims. And as we know, auto out is a fire suppression device that is specifically designed to address the problem of unattended cooking. So this small little canister, which is about the size of a tuna can, attaches with a magnet directly to the underside of your kitchen range hood. And upon flame activation due to some type of stovetop fire, a small little wick burns, and then the fire suppression powder releases from the canister and smothers the flames. So this is a step before that discharge of a sprinkler system, which would lead to a water damage situation for our running sprinkler head. So if we have a suppressant style device like this in our range hoods to put out that unattended cooking fire, then the sprinkler head would never activate. And if the sprinkler head doesn't activate due to a fire, then we will not have the resulting damage of water, which would end up from the 10th floor of a high rise potentially down to the first floor. And again, we have information on this because we do partner with the company to be able to provide this to various housing organizations. So If it's an activated sprinkler system due to a fire, as always, when it comes to fire planning, know your escape route from the building and call 911 as soon as possible. Ensuring all building occupants are organized away from fire lanes and fire department access routes is extremely important. And advising fire officials of any on-hand knowledge you may have about the building or the incident, any information that we can pass along to first responders when they arrive on scene. If it's an activated sprinkler system due to a fire, everybody's safety within the building is of the utmost importance. So follow your fire emergency response plan, follow your fire plan that's written within your emergency operations plans, and know your escape routes, and get help there as soon as possible. And the fire department will show up on scene, and they'll do their job to be able to put out that fire as quickly and as effectively as possible. If we have to replace a sprinkler head within our building due to an activation, let's say if it's an activation due to a fire or a sprinkler head broke because of an accident, we want to enlist the help of trained, qualified staff members or private contractors to replace any broken sprinkler heads. So we do need to have a particular number of sprinkler heads in our reserves, and typically they're in the fire protection room. So depending on the number of sprinkler heads, total number of sprinkler heads in a building, that will determine how many we need to have in reserves. But most importantly, when we're doing work on a sprinkler system, we always want to remember to place a sprinkler system back into service. So if we're unsure who would handle this, consult with your local building officials or your fire department or a third-party contractor that does the maintenance on your sprinkler system. There are NFPA statistics out there that state any type of failure within a sprinkler system is due to this. There's a high frequency of times where the system was not placed back into service correctly. So anytime that we're working on a sprinkler system, if we do have to replace a head or perform maintenance, we want to make sure the system goes back into service and works as it's intended to work. So in the aftermath of all of this, so we talked about fires or water damage as a result of a fire, along with accidental discharge of a sprinkler head. We know we need to move quickly. The faster remediation begins, the better. When it comes to water, mold spores can start growing 24 hours after water damage has occurred. Health risks to consider after water damage include mold, unsanitary water, lead dust, asbestos, or even electric shock. So if we do have a significant amount of water within our building, having a local building official on scene, along with a health department representative, and then working in tandem with the fire department, they're going to give the okay when it's safe to enter the building or if it's not safe to enter a building. So whether the water comes out of a sprinkler system or the hose bed from a fire truck, we want to make sure that people have adequate personal protective equipment on if they're going to enter a building and they start to abate that accident or emergency that happened. So again, having a local disaster mitigation company on call so they can begin that process, that definitely should be a part of your emergency plans and response plans for your organization. So we never want to re-enter a building after a fire or a water discharge unless the fire, building, and health officials say it's safe to do so. As I said in the previous slide, ensure all personnel who enter the property are wearing the appropriate PPE. Consult with a water damage mitigation specialist to remove unsalvageable items, assess structural damage, and begin water remediation. And also ensure the building's electrical system is inspected by a local building or health department for any water-related issues before using power outlets and appliances. As we know, water and electricity don't mix. So if there is a large volume of water that is in the building now, we want to make sure that we've identified any and all areas where that water could have gone, and if it has either passed by or ran over or touched any part of the electrical system, we want to make sure that that system is inspected before we go to use it. So who has the final say? The authority having jurisdiction is the organization, office, or individual responsible for enforcing the requirements of a code or standard, or for approving equipment, materials, installations, and procedures. So whether that's your state fire marshal, your fire department's fire prevention division, these are the ones that are going to say, this is how we want you as a property owner to respond to emergencies that you may have within your buildings. So they will have the final say on approval of your pre-plans for this type of fire and water emergency. And again, from one jurisdiction to another, one may feel comfortable with, shutting down an isolation valve. Others may not. Others may say, just let the fire department deal with it. But as long as you pre-plan your building, so that way when the fire department gets there, they know where to go, they have the information, and they know where, isolation valves and control valves are. That's going to save some time and help them mitigate that incident a little quicker. So consult with your AHJ, have that proactive relationship, and they're going to be the ones that give you the okay in regards to a level of training and information and what they feel comfortable with. Additional resources that we have within our risk management department, on our risk management center for our website, we have fire-related water damage, toolbox talks, do's and don'ts for dealing with fire-related water damage, along with what to do in a fire. So these resources are available on our website. You can always contact your risk control consultant that you may have, depending on the area that you live in the United States. We have various risk control consultants in different territories. My contact information is here on the screen. So if there are any direct questions for me, my email address is there along with my phone number and extension. Do we still perform on-site assessments? So if that question is in regards to our risk control surveys, yes, we do. So depending on what an underwriter might like as far as a risk control survey, yes, we still go on site and perform inspections. If we can't do it, we would send a third-party contractor to you. But if you would like your site inspected or even have some questions about fire protection equipment and things like that, contact your risk control consultant and they'll be able to point you in the right direction. And again, if you want an extra set of eyes or ears on your property, we can come out and do it. And we even now have the capability and the technology to do a virtual inspection. So if you're on site and we're in our home office, you can walk us around the site and we can do a virtual inspection too and assessment of your locations. So the question that was asked, is it possible to install elevator drains where none currently exist? Yes. So that is a possibility. Like I said, so what you need to do is, there are various companies. There's really two companies that make these threshold drains, and you've probably seen them before. Typically when you walk in, a large commercial facility or even a bank, you might walk over these drains and you don't even know they're there. But retrofitting them into your building, what they'll do is, depending on the size of your elevator and your elevator banks, so if it's just a single elevator or tandem elevators, you might have a freight elevator on one side and a passenger elevator on the other. Depending on the size of that elevator shaft, they make a recommendation on the size of drain that you would need, and along with the actual surface area of the drain, underneath it would be the diameter of the piping to get the required amount of flow out of the actual threshold drain. Because if there's a certain amount of gallons of water per minute that are coming out of the sprinkler head, you want to make sure that that threshold drain can handle it. So what an engineer would do is come in, look at your building, look at the actual construction features of that concrete slab within your building, and then work with a contractor to figure out the process to trench that area in front of an elevator, install the drain, and then from the drain, go down with your piping so the piping goes through the elevator shaft and out of the building. So it is a process to get engineers involved, but the option definitely does exist. And what that's going to do, it's going to keep your elevator in service, and we're not going to have hundreds and thousands of gallons of water in that elevator pit that make your elevator go out of service, and now the people can't use the elevator in your building. Will this insulation open a domino issue if the floor tile to the elevator is asbestos glued tiles? The answer to that, as we can all imagine, probably would be yes. So the best place to start is going to be with a contractor engineer and an engineer, because they're going to look at your building and they're going to identify, you know, depending on the flooring or the tile, what hazards exist with, you know, because even if you pull up one layer of flooring, you may not know asbestos tile is underneath it. So yes, if it's determined that, you know, in that work we find asbestos tiles, you know, we know that that hazard is going to have to be mitigated to perform that work. So to put it in lighter terms, yes, that domino issue will come into play, but if we have a plan before we start working, then hopefully the work can be completed in the safest and most efficient way possible.